As I'm sure a lot of you know, I scaled up from doing 3-unit deals, really a triplex, to doing 200-unit deals now. So I won't go into the specifics because I've gone into that on previous videos, but what I will do is kind of walk you through what I've learned during that process, just because I'm sure a lot of you are trying to do this as well, and it'll probably be relevant. So the first thing is that deals actually do get easier as you get bigger. And this is kind of counterintuitive. You'd think it would get a little harder, but in reality, you have more competent people you're working with, right? Your counterparty, they actually understand what they're doing. Most of the time, they're institutions. The brokers can actually facilitate the transaction because they're kind of professionals more than people who are doing it fly by night. And even when you start managing the deal, the management's professional, right? Because you can afford for full-on third-party management or more payroll at the property, whatever it is. There's actually less for you to personally do a lot of the time because everyone else is doing it for you, and the level of the people you're around it's higher, right? It's more competent. So that's one of the big things I learned. I knew that kind of from the institutional level when I worked there already. There was a big drop off in quality when I started doing my own deals, and then it's kind of risen back up now. So it actually does get easier from that perspective. Second is the debt risk, right? So debt is almost always the most risky part of the transaction. I would say 9 times out of 10 it is. And as you get bigger, the risk actually gets a little bit less. And really that's because in that sub $5 million space, almost every lender you deal with is going to require a personal guarantee. This never bothered me that much. I know it does bother some people. I was always very confident in the deals I was doing, but banks are almost always going to require a personal guarantee. And even when you start doing bridge debt, right, a hard money lender, they're going to require a personal guarantee as well. So almost every lender you go to, there are probably some credit unions and other things you could do that would reduce the risk. A lot of times they'll do personal guarantees as well. Sometimes banks, if you go low enough leverage, they'll be fine with it. And obviously if you go seller financing, sometimes you could go non-recourse to seller financing. But as you scale up, most of the debt you actually can access becomes non-recourse. And agencies, that's Fannie or Freddie debt, that's non-recourse. There are carve-outs there, bad boy carve-outs, but just standard stuff. Obviously, if you don't trip anything like that, it's still non-recourse. CMBS is typically non-recourse. And even most of the bridge debt that you're going to take on is non-recourse. The deal I'm under contract on right now, that bridge debt is non-recourse. So from that perspective, your kind of downside actually becomes, the risk becomes lessened as you get bigger, which is also a little bit counterintuitive because the debt size is higher, but the overall risk is actually lower. The one thing that does get harder is the business plan execution. So when you're doing a smaller deal, there's just not that much work to be done because there aren't that many units, right? So let's just say there's a 5-unit deal that you're doing and you want to get in and out of it in a year. You only need to renovate 5 units. So that's maybe what, 1 unit every other month and you're done. When you start getting to these bigger deal sizes, even if you extend out the time frame, let's say a 3-year time frame for a 200-unit deal, which is kind of standard. I mean, most people underwrite kind of 3 to 5 year time frames for that. You're doing a lot more units every month, right? You have 36 months on 200 units, not that much time. You know, you need to do multiple units a month. You need to be sure that you have a dialed in process. And it's a lot that needs to be done. You have the contractors there, you need to have the leasing team leasing up the units. There's a lot more that needs to be organized and a lot more operations that need to be dialed in. When you're smaller, you can kind of get away with just not having good operations and just kind of skating by. And you'll see this happen with a lot of the syndicators who were really in the Sun Belt. And what happened is they grew really quickly and they took on bridge debt most of the time. And they grew really quickly and they didn't realize that they didn't have the operations dialed. And the bridge debt typically has a shorter time frame, right? They're probably around 12 to 36 months most of the time. And they just weren't able to execute their business plans in time. So they renovated maybe half the units they thought they could in that time frame because they were so used to doing smaller deals where you could just get it done so quickly. So that's one thing that does get harder. That's what you want to watch out for. That's why I'd really recommend not taking on bridge debt. So you give yourself, usually with standard bank debt, you have a 5-year time frame to execute your business plan, which just gives you a lot more time. So I would recommend that as you scale up. And only when you really know your numbers cold, you can kind of move into bridge debt. One thing that does shift is the type of work. So obviously when you're smaller, a lot of times you're doing kind of work with the properties, you're interacting or interfacing more with kind of the tenants, with the land, with the management, everything like that. It becomes more, I mean, once you have people on site doing payroll, you have not doing payroll, on site payroll, and then you have third-party management above it. Obviously, you're still looking closely at the deal, but the type of decisions you're making are very different, right? It's mainly what scope are we going to go with this renovation? Do you want to go higher scope? Do you want to go lower scope? What about the rents? Where do we want to price those? How about any capital events? Do you want to lease up quickly when maybe at a lower rate, or do you want to take a longer time at a higher rate, right? Just a ton of kind of things like that that are really, it's not as effort related. It's more about you making a smart decision. So that type of work becomes a little bit more intellectual. And obviously, look, it's real estate. There's nothing incredibly intellectual about it, but it becomes way more of a thinking process, the work, versus, oh, let's just brute force it. And you're really getting paid to make those decisions rather than to be on the ground. Next thing is that scaling becomes pretty easy. There's absolutely no difference between a 200 unit deal and a 100 unit deal in terms of executing it, right? Aside from the time it's going to take to renovate some units, there's no difference, right? Everything else is the same. And if you've done a few deals before then, you know everything very well. So all that's happening is you start just increasing your profit margins a lot, because it doesn't take more people in-house for you to do a deal like that. Obviously, maybe it takes more crews on the ground to renovate the units, but it's not taking any more internal team members, right? If you have an asset manager, for example, it's the same amount of work to manage a 100 unit deal as there's a 200 unit deal. So the scaling becomes pretty easy because you can manage a lot of assets without having to increase headcount. And obviously, the higher you get, the more profit margin there is there. And that's why you'll see a lot of companies that have a lot of AUM and just not that many employees, because it's very possible. Next thing is that competition can actually be a lot easier. At the institutional level, you'll just have firms that are, for some reason or another, structural sellers. So maybe they're saying, all right, this is the last asset we own in this asset class. We're looking to get out of it entirely and pivot to self-storage, right? From multifamily to self-storage, whatever it is. They're kind of just going to offload that off, get it off their books, and they don't really care what price it goes for. If they sell for 20% less, it doesn't really matter to them. You'll see this with, maybe they'll buy a portfolio and there's 5 assets over $100 million and 1 asset that's $10 million or $15 million. They're not going to care what price that sells for. They're just going to sell it because it's really irrelevant to them. So you have a lot of kind of occasions like that, or maybe their fund life is ending. You'll have a lot of occasions like that where people are structural sellers, and also occasions where they're not buyers. Maybe they would love to buy the deal, but their fund mandate says you can only buy X% of Sunbelt Multi in a certain vintage, and they've already bought that. So they have to pass on the deal. So maybe the buyer pool is a little bit lightened for that specific deal. So you'll just have kind of occasions that come up. And obviously that comes up a little bit in those smaller deal sizes. And you could always find great deals in the smaller deal sizes. Maybe some divorce, whatever's going on, personal life, things happen. But what I have noticed is that the buyer pool is way more consistent, I think, in the smaller deal sizes, where you're always going to have a certain, just a level of bid, which is great when you're selling because there's a liquidity pool. And it's also sometimes great when you're buying. But it's, when you get the institutional level, you'll just have certain times where the market just seems really thin. And that obviously leads to a lot of opportunity. So I think the competition can be easier a lot of the time. The last thing is just on the scaling itself, you actually have to force yourself to do it. So if you have a 10 unit deal, right, 20 unit deal, whatever you want to call it, and you make really good money on it, your first instinct is always to say, all right, let's do another one. And that's actually not what you want to do. Like if you do a 5 unit deal, you want your next one to be 10 units or 15 or 20 units, and then scaling up from there. It's very easy to get caught in those lower size ranges where you're basically just doing the same deal over and over because that's what you're comfortable with. And it's not going to kill you. You're still going to make money, but you're not going to make as much money as you could. And really the way you want to think about it is, as you get bigger, if you do a mediocre deal in a 2 to 5 times bigger size range, you're going to make way more money than you would if you did a home run deal that's smaller. So it just makes so much more sense from a math perspective. And the deals I'm doing now, my first deal, I made under $1,000 on it. Obviously, it's triplex. The deals I do now, I make hundreds and hundreds of thousands at minimum, if not into the millions, even if I do a mediocre deal, and you just get paid so much more just because you're doing bigger deals. Obviously, performance matters. I'm not going to say it doesn't. And obviously, you're looking to do deals that are as good as possible. But in terms of the average result of the deal, you're going to get paid way more for doing a bigger deal. So that's why I think it makes sense to scale, obviously to a certain degree, right? It's hard to start doing $1 billion deals. Maybe I'll do that eventually, but I doubt it. I think I'll probably stay in kind of the sub $100 million range, but who knows? But that's really how I look at it. And you almost want to do the math and be like, all right, let's say it's 100K unit at a 10 unit deal. You buy it for, right? And you sell it for 120K unit. So you make 20K unit on 10 units. It's fine, right? You're making $200,000. But if you make 20K unit on 50 units, it's a lot more money, right? So you kind of have to think about it that way. And that's really everything I kind of learned as I scaled. It's what I will say is it's a little bit easier than you think it would be. The work does differ a bit, and some new challenges come into play on the operational side. But overall, I'd say it's very, very worth it. If you're stuck in a W-2 job and want to replace your income with real estate, I run a one-on-one program where I'll personally show you how to find profitable deals and build real wealth. Matt was struggling to scale. Now he stabilized a $3.5 million deal that should net him over $1 million in profit. Sean joined when he was stuck at his job. In under 2 years, he acquired over $2 million in real estate and now has a clear path out of his W-2. Amin was able to quit his job of 11 years. Taylor completely changed the trajectory of his life. These are just a few examples. So if you do want results like this, click the link in the description to apply for the Acquisitions Bootcamp. Limited spots are available as we handle all appointments personally.